Jiu-Jitsu black belts don't always know what they're talking about with regards to stuff off the mat. What's going on? My name's Paul Green. I'm a former British Paratrooper and Special Forces Support Group operator. Over the past decade, I've trained thousands of elite soldiers in building their physical body armour, deleting their injuries, and now I do exactly the same with grapplers. Now, Lachlan Giles is different. He is actually a qualified physiotherapist off the mats. Craig Jones is a social media ninja. Off the mats, he's actually pretty switched on. Right? So these guys are talking about injury prevention and what to do when you're injured and talking about jiu-jitsu in general. So let's listen to their conversation, and if I can add value, then I will do.
Some people are super fragile, eh? Like you'll see them get put in any form of footlock and it just pops straight away.
You're the opposite.
I mean, mine are stretched out now, so I'm just allowing them to go a bit far day by day.
I don't know whether you've seen Craig Jones' is foot mobility. He can literally bend his foot like a ballet dancer. And it's just through training. He's literally trained his foot mobility to be like that. He's not born with that. People think, oh, look, he's born with great mobility. No, these guys have literally sat on their heels and leant back for hours. And he has got unbelievable foot mobility, so pretty much impossible to straight foot lock.
You know, you need a good poker face, bluff them out of it. That's all it is, I think. All right, we've got to get to your recovery. All right, stretching?
Recovery. The next thing Craig Jones said is stretching. Most people, when they think of the word recovery, they automatically, subconsciously go straight to stretching. Craig Jones is speaking on behalf of 99% of grapplers when he suggests the word stretching here. Most people think stretching helps with your recovery.
Useful or not useful? For what? For jiu-jitsu?
Useful.
And all forms of stretching. For jiu-jitsu, stretching all body parts.
Stretching is useful for performance, not useful, partially useful for injury prevention.
Why do you say partially?
Stretching's useful for performance. He said not useful for injury prevention. Then he backtracked and said partially useful. I've been saying this for years. Stretching is overrated. People turn up to class 20 minutes early to do some stretching. They stay back and do some stretching. That's 30 minutes out of their day stretching. And it's only partially useful for injury prevention.
Because it can be worse and it can be better. Like the more range a joint has, the less stable it is. Right? So like if something moves a lot, it's harder to keep the structure of it tight.
This is why it's important to strengthen the new range in which you get. So when you do proper mobility training, which nobody ever does, like proper mobility training requires you to train your mobility close to failure, just like you would when you're lifting weights, training close to failure to build physical capabilities. Now, when you do the exact same mentality with your mobility, you need to train the strength of that new range. Hopefully you understand, because if you train the strength of your new range, you recapture that stability rather than leading into a rabbit hole of an unstable, untrained joint that's just more flexible.
Yeah, like hypermobility, right? Sort of.
Not even just hypermobility, I mean just more mobility, right? Just think of like your shoulder, you know, like does a whole, like your shoulder moves outwards, forwards, it rotates. It's like one of the most mobile joints in the body. Also much more prone than other joints to dislocating because of that. Because
one point on shoulder dislocations, one of the worst injuries you can ever get. Americana position, Kimura position, and how often do we tap to an Americana? Without getting into the weeds of why people don't tap to Americanas, basically the external rotator cuff muscles have low blood flow, so it's low pain. Anyway, one of the reasons, if you're one person that does struggle with shoulder dislocates, one thing that you can do that's really cool, really simple and really accessible is grab a set of scales at home, right? and basically internally rotate this movement here, internally rotate through that set of scales. That'll give you a reading, a score of your current strength level of your internal rotation. Turn around, lay on your back and do exactly the same for external rotation and get a score. If them scores are pretty similar, you're in a good space and the likelihood of a dislocation is actually pretty low. But if there's a massive difference, say external rotation's like 11 kilos and external rotation's like 11 kilos and your internal rotation's like 2 or 3, you need to prioritize building the strength of your internal rotation. Now, I'm going to drop a link in the description. The first link in the description will be for a free rotator cuff strength system in which takes you through white belt, blue belt, purple belt, brown belt, black belt. You know, a nice protocol to build up the strength of your internal external rotator cuff group, because that is one of the worst injuries you can have in jiu-jitsu, by the way. People talk about heel hooks. Fuck me. If you have struggles with dislocated shoulders, horrendous.
You have a structure that moves so much, but is also stable. If you wanted it really stable, it would like be locked in, right? And then it can't move much. If you want it to be able to move a lot, it's got to be a loose.
That's what
structure.
bodybuilders can't.
Yeah. So in a lot of sport, or like a lot.
One point on that bodybuilding, yet we see the typical struggling bodybuilder that is tight and full of steroids. Muscle mass is the foundation for strength, power, everything, right? Muscle mass is the foundation. It gets a bad representation in the jiu-jitsu space because the typical stereotype is a juiced up lunatic who doesn't really know how to train. What about the bodybuilders that can do the fucking splits on the stage? Do you know what I mean? Arnold Classic was a couple of weeks ago and there was a guy, probably like 20 stone of pure muscle, just do the splits. Imagine that on the mat.
And people say like getting more flexible or having more range of motion.
Sorry, just to finish the point that I was about to make. You don't have to build muscle through a limited range so you lose mobility. You can build muscle through full range so that you maintain and increase mobility. So when you go to talk about stretching, you can talk about stretching alone, which is generally body weight, or you can stretch with weight and kill two birds with one stone.
Can be a liability for injury. But at the same time, you might having flexible hips and hamstrings will mean your back has to bend less if you're getting stacked. You know, like you think about, if you would have seen people that hurt their neck getting stacked, those real stiff people, and they've gotten stacked, and it's like their neck jams up before anything else touches the mat. Like, obviously that doesn't happen to me really because I fold pretty well. Obviously, like something else could injure, but like for my neck, that's so like it can be. But I think a problem is like you get more flexible and then you start using it. You're like, oh, okay, I'm flexible, so I'll put myself in these spots, which can be.
I'm all for using your physical capabilities, like strength. Oh, you're so strong. Oh, you're so flexible. You have done the time, you've done the work to build your physical capabilities. Now, why would you ever leave them physical capabilities at home? I can understand what he's saying. He's trying not to be too disrespectful to being flexible, but he's so right and he's so balanced in his opinion as for stretching, for injury prevention, even though he has got a lot of flexibility. Very interesting and such a good point of view, accurate.
For performance sometimes, but it is probably not good to be sitting there getting balled up and squashed over and over again.
Yeah, I don't know how your back survives that,
I try not to do it under load. I try to do it on my own.
I feel like I get flexibility from playing guard retention with people that are shit at passing them. I just let them stretch my legs out.
Yeah.
Feels like resistance stretching.
Yeah, so stretching for that. So stretching's yes or no?
Well, when you go on Instagram and you see crazy people, because obviously jiu-jitsu people recommend all the wildest shit, like doing yoga every day and stuff like.
It's the fitness industry.
Yeah. But we overlap with that,
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
But you don't do any lifting either.
No.
So no lifting. How often do you stretch?
Well, I don't really stretch anymore.
So once you achieve the flexibility, you don't need to stretch anymore.
I mean, only because I'm not really competing, so like I was doing it for performance. Now I can't be bothered.
But your flexibility.
It stays for the most part, as long as you're using it. Strength training actually does, like strengthening is probably one thing that's been shown to reduce the risk of injury.
Pros for it, but also the weaknesses. And you can see by the fact that he's actually thinking about his answers, and he's struggling to give answers with regards to how stretching fits from an injury prevention point of view. There's a lot to be said about watching that behaviour, watching him actually try and be nice about his injury prevention measures. The fact that he said strength training actually does reduce the risk of injuries, but he just doesn't do it because he can't be bothered, because he's teaching fucking shitloads. I can understand that. That's it from me. If you've got any questions regarding my one-to-one program where I help grapplers delete injuries and build physical body armour, the second link in the description is to book onto a call with me, and we can discuss whether you are a good fit for my program. But shoulders, first link in the description. That's it. See you tomorrow.